What do computers, AI, rockets, and self-driving cars have in common? They're all powered by semiconductors, miraculous chips that are at the base of the current IT revolution. And the giant that allowed all this to happen is the Taiwanese manufacturer TSMC. At the moment, semiconductors are under everyone's attention, as a chip shortage caused a halt in the productions for all major corporations. But TSMC also plays a key political role. In recent years, China's threats over Taiwan to gain control of this territory is causing uncertainty both on the technological and diplomatic side. So, why are semiconductors essential? And what does the future hold for TSMC? TSMC is the largest and most advanced chipmaker in the world, supplying the biggest companies: Apple, Nvidia, Intel, you name it. And it's so powerful that it doesn't compete with companies, it competes with governments. So, how did they achieve this global monopoly? Back in the 80s, large American corporations like Intel used to make their own chips in-house. In those days, profits for the IT sector were booming, and companies like Apple were becoming leading players. It was then that more and more companies started outsourcing their chip manufacturing. They decided to focus on aspects like the chip's design, and then simply produce the chips elsewhere. That's because fabrications plants, also called fabs, are extremely expensive and hardly profitable. So, while big tech moved their productions abroad, someone saw an opportunity there. Chang, soon-to-be founder of TSMC, made a career for himself in the United States. Maybe you never heard of him, but he changed your life more than you think. Originally from Taiwan, Chang moved overseas to attend Harvard, Stanford, and MIT, and then went on to work at Texas Instruments for 25 years. His specialty? Electrical engineering, of course. It was in 1985, when Chang was already in his mid-50s, that he was contacted by the Taiwanese government to help grow the new industry of semiconductors. Chang flew back home, and in 1987, he founded TSMC as a joint venture mainly between the government of Taiwan and Philips Electronics. The strategy itself is simple, but revolutionary. If the large American corporations just design the semiconductors but don't want to produce them anymore, let's create a number of foundries that are only dedicated to building chips. They design them, but we make them, and we sell them. For US companies, semiconductors manufacturing was an expensive burden, but to the Taiwanese, it rapidly became gold. Because without semiconductors, you can forget about electronics. Life has a sense of humor if we think that Western corporations are now pouring billions while trying to catch up with the Taiwanese giant.
The legislation would invest $52 billion to incentivize domestic semiconductor production. It is essential to our national security.
TSMC wasn't immediately profitable. In the beginning, the company was operating at a loss, but Chang believed that it was all about getting an early market share, and then the economy of scale will generate fat margins. And so it did, becoming one of the top 10 most valuable companies in the world, with a market cap of nearly $600 billion. Nowadays, as political tensions rise, TSMC has become a key player in the silent fight between the US and China. But before we get into political dominance and military strategies, let's answer the real question here. What the heck is a semiconductor? Roughly speaking, a semiconductor is the brain of electronic devices. It's the chip that allows them to calculate and run programs. It's made of silicon crystal, a pretty common element that can generally be found in sand. And each chip is made of smaller components called transistors. If a semiconductor is the brain, you can think of transistors as the neurons, and there are billions of transistors in a semiconductor. So, when electricity flows through a semiconductor, voila, it brings information. But how? Well, information is transmitted through electric current, and it follows a language called binary code, so it's 0 or 1. In nature, materials are either conductors, when they conduct electricity pretty well, so the current flows through them, like copper, or they are insulators, when they don't conduct electricity easily, like glass. A semiconductor is both a conductor and an insulator, depending on specific conditions. This way, you can have electricity passing through the semiconductor and it's recognized as 1, or you can have no electricity at all and it's recognized as 0. And through infinite strings of zeros and ones, our information is processed and transmitted. So, why are semiconductors part of the arms race between Washington and Beijing? First, let's start by saying that semiconductors, this sort of magic behind electronics, is not only present in phones, computers, and cars, but also in drones, missiles, and jet fighters like the F-35. This makes it a key component of the weapons industry, and governments are not happy to completely rely on foreign production. And in fact, they shouldn't. Now, in computer science, there's a principle known as Moore's Law. Gordon Moore is one of the co-founders of Intel, and in the 60s, he made a prediction that the number of transistors per silicon chip would double every 2 years. And this is what happened, because through the years, chips got smaller, faster, and more efficient. In fact, there's a battle between companies for who makes the smallest and most advanced chips. Right now, TSMC is by far the winner, and this year it will start producing the very first 3-nanometer nodes, the smallest on Earth, which, to get an idea, has the size of 1/20,000th of a human hair. But this is also a major problem. Here's an example. You're TSMC, and this year you'll produce the new generation of chips with 3-nanometer nodes. So first, you need to build a new production plant for this new line of semiconductors. And this means billions of investments. Meanwhile, you're still producing other chips as well, such as the 5-nanometer ones, for example, because different electronic devices require different chips. The problem is that in a couple of years, there's going to be a new, improved generation of chips that will require you to invest other billions in a new plant if you want to remain competitive. And so it goes on and on. It's an industry that burns cash fast enough to make your head spin. And who can afford billions in investments every 2 years? Almost nobody. Not even the US or Chinese government can afford it. For its latest 3-nanometer line, TSMC invested around $20 billion and built a plant that's as big as 22 football fields. So, the bottom line is that governments rely on TSMC because semiconductors are simply too expensive to produce. And that's when the political situation gets heated. The situation between China and Taiwan has been a ticking bomb for decades. Taiwan is an island of about 23 million people, and it's located 100 miles off the Chinese coast. It's an independent and democratic state, but the Chinese government doesn't see it that way. To President Xi Jinping, Taiwan is just a province that needs to be conquered and reunited. In fact, when Mao and the Communist Party took control of China in 1949, the former ruling party of China fled to Taiwan and lived under threat of invasion ever since. But the United States is Taiwan's biggest ally and vowed to protect the country in case of Chinese attack. So, how's this stalemate related to semiconductors? Both the US and China are customers of TSMC, but both are desperately trying to reduce their dependence on foreign chip makers. However, this is nearly impossible. Why? Just to get an idea, China spends more on importing computer chips than oil, and the US is in a similar situation, with their heavy dependence on Asian firms like TSMC and Samsung. So, neither country can match the firepower of the Taiwanese company. Both countries realize that the key component to the weapon and tech industries is currently produced abroad. And this is a dramatic reality for them. The Trump administration and the Pentagon responded by demanding TSMC to open a plant in Arizona for an investment of $12 billion. While this makes sense politically, it won't solve the issue. That is because soon a new generation of chips will come out and a brand new plant will have to be built, and the process will repeat itself every 2 years or so. Even President Biden's plan to invest $50 billion to boost America's semiconductors industry is not enough, because TSMC itself will invest $100 billion in the next 3 years. So the reality here is that TSMC simply has no competitors, not even governments. Decades ago, when major American and European corporations decided to outsource the production, they probably didn't know it was a one-way street. And what about China? The country has been investing a fortune in recent years, but its semiconductors are still generations behind those produced by TSMC. And considering that China is a customer of TSMC, Taiwan is maybe protected, because a potential attack would have a devastating effect on China's own economy. Possibly. Maybe, on the other hand, it makes Taiwan even more attractive, and thus at risk. Semiconductors are the future of the world. When the recent chip shortage happened, governments freaked out. Call it Moore's Law, call it 21st century, but TSMC has a monopoly in a market upon which everything depends. AI, electric cars, 5G, metaverse, everything. And one day, they might be asked to pick a side, because semiconductors are playing a major role between the superpowers. One thing is certain, when it comes to technology and politics, we've seen nothing yet. Meanwhile, TSMC is already focusing on its next chip, the 3D one,